Sydney once had an extensive tram network which closed in 1961. And a unique part of that system was the number of isolated lines that were technically part of the network, but not physically connected by tramlines. Lines such as the Enfield and Parramatta lines, and the southern suburbs of Sydney at one time had 4 different isolated lines. There was the Arncliffe to Bexley steam tram, the Cogra to Sandringham and Sans Souci steam line, the Sutherland to Cronulla line, and the topic of this video, the Rockdale to Brighton-Le-Sands line. And Brighton-Le-Sands is on the shores of Botany Bay south of Sydney, and it was first a steam tram and then later an electric tram line. I'm Marty, and welcome to BackTracks. The line from Rockdale to Brighton-Le-Sands was a pretty simple one. It connected Rockdale railway station with Brighton-Le-Sands, basically in a straight line down Bay Street. Even though it was a simple one, it had a very interesting history, more than its 2 kilometres of single track would at first suggest. At one end of the line, it was a very nice beach, Lady Robinson's Beach, which was on the bay of Botany Bay. Now, Botany Bay is a pretty famous place because just across from Brighton-Le-Sands was where Captain Cook landed in April 1770, starting the beginning of Britain's interest in Australia and its eventual colonisation. And that's what happened 18 years later when Governor Phillip sailed into the bay in January 1788. But he thought it was unsuitable for a penal colony, so he ended up going a short distance north to today's Sydney Harbour. And the other end of the tram line was Rockdale train station. It opened in October 1884 as part of the Illawarra line, and it was electrified in 1926.
Over 5 million passengers annually use the Rockdale railway station, the largest in the New South Wales network.
Apparently now it's the 26th busiest train station. Now back to the trams. Why did the tram line connect these 2 locations in the first place? Well, like many great projects at the time, it can be traced back to the vision of just one person. During the 1880s, Thomas Saywell developed land on the shores of Botany Bay. He built a leisure resort, including swimming baths, a hotel and picnic grounds. These all later became the suburb of Brighton-Le-Sands. Now, Thomas Saywell was an interesting man. He was at one stage Sydney's only tobacconist and apparently owned Australia's first cigarette-making machine. He operated coal mines and he was a property developer, developing suburbs like Beaconsfield and Queen's Park. But his claim to fame for BackTracks was that he created the Brighton-Le-Sands resort and in 1885 built a steam tramway to service it. Basically, it was connecting his resort to the closest railway station, which was Rockdale, about 2 kilometres away. Now, Thomas Saywell wasn't a novice when it came to tramways because he operated them in a number of his coal mines. Now, the line he built was basically a single track that ran in a straight line along Bay Street from Rockdale to Brighton-Le-Sands. Now, once the line reached the beach, it originally turned and headed north for a couple of kilometres to what is now known as Bestick Street. But that extension didn't last long because it was mostly sand dunes at the time and there was nothing there to draw passengers. The line ran along what is today the northernmost part of the Grand Parade. Apparently Saywell actually planted the Norfolk Island pines in this shot. When that extension was closed, it was cut back to just a short left-hand turn, exiting Bay Street and entering the Grand Parade. But soon trams had trouble traversing that corner and the terminus was cut back to the end of Bay Street. This image from 1900 shows the new electric tram sitting at the corner of Bay Street and the Grand Parade. Behind the tram you can see the chimneys of Thomas Saywell's New Brighton Hotel, which was built on the site of the current Novotel Hotel. To the left are the minaret turrets of the Pavilion Hall, which opened in 1887, and an area of land was set aside on the southern side of Bay Street as a picnic reserve known as Shady Nook. That block today is filled with lots of restaurants and is a pretty lively place on Friday and Saturday nights. Steam trams operated for 15 years until the route was electrified in 1900, uniquely with twin overhead wires, which eliminated the need to weld the rails. Saywell operated electric trams for another 14 years until in 1914 the line was taken over by the government and partially rebuilt, operating out of a new depot with N-class trams taken from the main system. In 1928, Rockdale Council built a semicircular shark-proof swimming pool at the southern part of the beach. It had diving boards and attracted thousands of visitors on warm days.
Trains, trams and buses from all directions converge upon the thriving centre that is Rockdale. The double-decked omnibus bring the pleasure seeker from the city, western suburbs or elsewhere, right to the sunny foreshores of Botany Bay.
Now, to service those pools, the line was extended then to the right to head down to Terralba Road, where it was the terminus until the end of the life of the line. So that's enough of the story of the beach end of the line. Now let's head up Bay Street to Rockdale. The line was a single track for most of its length, with a passing loop at Far Street opened in 1922. The single line ran adjacent to the curb on the northern side of the road, which is on the right-hand side when travelling up to Rockdale. Once the electric line opened, N-class trams were used by the government between 1914 and 1939. And up until 1924, these cars actually hauled trailers when demand required. These were two B-class steam trailers left over from the original steam tramway. Now, these N-class trams were later replaced by LP-class, and they were used on the line from 1920 to 1949. To house the electric trams, a small timber-framed galvanised shed was built on a block of land on the northern side of the line, bounded by Aero and Francis Avenue. It had 3 tracks and could hold 6 trams, and access was by a single line connection to Bay Street with a turnout facing Rockdale. This new depot opened in June 1914, and it was designed to be actually the first bay of a much larger depot, which was envisaged to hold around 80 cars, and this was on the basis the line would be connected to the main system along West Botany Street. Now, during the government era, a maximum of 14 trams were attached to the depot, and that basically became about 8 LP class trams for the last 7 years of operation. Now, this depot was actually treated as a sub-depot to Tempe, and as such did not have regular admin staff, but a maximum of 25 people worked in the depot and on the trams from 1932, finishing at about 17 when the line closed in 1949. The tram terminus at Rockdale was a double track in the aptly named Tramway Arcade.
Rockdale, the ideal suburb, has everything to offer the home seeker, businessman or speculator. The wonderful shopping centre is the mecca of the shopkeeper and the shopper alike. The fine up-to-date stores, shops and public buildings make it a business suburb without rival.
And the line got so busy at times that this terminus couldn't handle the capacity. So there were plans to extend the terminus by turning north at the railway station, where the bus stops are now, but needed 2 shops to be demolished, and those plans never went ahead.
Modern electric trolley buses and trains serve this nerve centre of the municipality.
I just realised the narrator to this 1940s film didn't mention anything about modern trams. The other interesting part of this terminus was that the isolated line was connected to the main Southern Railway at Rockdale using a points connection. The tram line connected with the railway line, sweeping to the left just where that man is walking through shot now. In 1949, the entire line was closed, replaced by a bus service. Now, the first notice of the line's closure was only made 3 days before, on September 3rd, 1949. Apparently, this late notice was designed to avoid the public protest meetings which took place following the announcement of the closure of the Enfield system only a couple of months earlier. So the last day of operation was Saturday the 3rd of September, and all trams carried wreaths provided by local residents. Crowds lined the street at 1 a.m. for the very final trip, singing Auld Lang Syne. Now, the tram crews obviously were probably pretty devastated by their line being closed, so they were all on duty from very early morning till well after the last tram, most being present for a 20-hour shift. And they were still in pretty high spirits at the end, apparently, to then have a party back at the depot, which didn't finish until daybreak. When the line closed, the 9 trams were progressively transported to Mascot, where they were placed back on the tram tracks. All the trams were burnt or sold, except tram number 154, which was repainted and re-entered service at Rozelle Depot, and in 1950 it was preserved at the Loftus Tramway Museum. Well, that about wraps it up. A longish story about a pretty short line. A line that was created by a man that was a tobacconist, a property developer, a coal mine owner, a guy that built pleasure grounds and swimming pools, and the licensee of a pub that also lost its license. We can talk about that another time.
To really live, you must live in Rockdale.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time when we take a look at former Sydney tramlines of the Sydney tramway system.